Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories of the hour. The US Justice Department is releasing over 3 million pages from the Epstein files. Officials say photos of women are redacted except those of Ghislaine Maxwell. Venezuela's acting president, Delcy Rodriguez, announces plans for a general amnesty for political violence cases. Authorities say the El Helioside prison will also be closed. Thousands march in Minneapolis against President Trump's immigration crackdown. The protests follow the deaths of 2 U.S. citizens during federal operations. Washington announces additional sanctions tied to Iran. The move comes as tensions remain high despite talk of possible negotiations between Washington and Tehran. The United States approves a $9 billion sale of Patriot missiles to Saudi Arabia. The deal comes as regional tensions with Iran remain high. More than 200 people die in a collapse at the Rubaya coltan mine in eastern DR Congo. The site produces about 15% of the world's coltan and is held by rebels. US senators pass a Trump-backed deal to limit the impact of a government shutdown, but a weekend funding lapse is still set because the House is not in session. US authorities charge journalist Don Lemon with civil rights violations over covering an anti-ICE protest in Minnesota. The case raises fresh questions about press freedom in the United States. Those are the headlines for the hour, and we head over to North America to start. And the US Justice Department has published a new and final cache of millions of documents related to the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche has said at a press conference that this batch of files marked the end of the Trump administration's planned releases under the Epstein Files Transparency Act. Blanche has also stated that the new cache includes more than 3 million pages, 2,000 videos and 180,000 images. Blanche has added that the files include extensive redactions given the law's exceptions permitting certain documents to be blacked out, including identifying information of victims or materials related to active investigations. Previous releases have been heavily redacted, drawing criticism from some lawmakers. Let's in fact listen in to what Blanche had to say on the issue.
Today we are producing more than 3 million pages, including more than 2,000 videos and 180,000 images. In total, that means that the department produced approximately 3.5 million pages in compliance with the Act. Just a quick note about the videos and images. The 2,000 videos and 180,000 images are not all videos and images taken by Mr. Epstein or someone around him. They include large quantities of commercial pornography and images that were seized from Epstein's devices, but which he did not take or that someone around him did not take.
Joining us now in this discussion is Major General Dr. Rajan Kochhar, an international relations expert, joining us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Dr. Kochhar, for joining us. This simply is the issue that does not seem to want to go away for Donald Trump, despite the forever changing headlines he puts forward. But of course, this is the final batch of Epstein files that is going to be released by the Department of Justice under Pam Bondi. We haven't gone through all of these. I'm sure information is going to come out during the remainder of the day, even the week, possibly due to the sheer volume of them. However, do you expect this to satisfy the American public and around the world, quite frankly. Given the nature in which the Department of Justice has gone about this release, especially due to those redactions that we're seeing extremely frequently come up in these files?
Good morning, Thomas, and thank you for inviting me to the program. There has been a sustained public pressure on these files for this disclosure because if you remember, this disclosure was done in installments. Like it didn't come out, everything that did not come out at the same time, and because these are voluminous kind of details, and they have to be gone through, and only then these disclosures can come out. So uh, this remains a symbol of elite impunity. Courts, Congress, and victim groups have pushed for transparency. As you said, that would the people be satisfied? Because what has actually happened is that most of these disclosures have come from Department of from these courts rather than from the government actually themselves. And this Department of Justice has done, I think, a fairly good job because it is extremely important that a fair degree of accountability and transparency is ensured. A larger question now is that what would be the political fallout of these documents coming into the public now, because it basically carries out the scrutiny of the politicians, billionaires, royalty, and the intelligence linked figures. So, one aspect will always remain that a political weaponization would happen, like in terms of partisan narratives. Both Democratic and Republicans are going to be exposed. That second is it will reopen certain questions on institutional credibility also, and it could damage in public perception, as your question was, that it could damage trust in US law enforcement and prosecutional discretion. And of course, legal aspects, like people are going to go to the court now because you already people have gone to the court on the basis of the previous disclosures, and now also once we are putting an end to this Epstein file story, because nothing more is going to come out now because everything is out in the open, and still certain things would not be shared with the public, maybe of a confidential or a classified nature, and possibly they may not come out. But whatever has actually come out, it would resort to people going to the court, filing fresh cases now, and but one thing is clear in the end, that this is less about crimes and more about exposing the architecture of elite protection, because um, this aspect, I think, is
Dr.
revealing.
Kochhar, do you think anything's going to come of this? Of course, now we've seen hundreds of thousands of documents now released, but no indication of any new cases being reopened, no indication of guilt when it comes to individuals that have been named. So do you think the American public are going to be satisfied with the outcomes of this release?
I don't think totally there would be a satisfaction among the American public, because the type of disclosures which are coming out really have not been that sensational, or they have not been of that kind that possibly would satisfy the thirst of information or a thirst of disclosures, which the public generally has this perception. So I don't think, in my own personal opinion, I don't think the people are going to be totally satisfied.
Okay, Dr. Kochar, do stay with us as we move on to our next story and we head over to the Middle East. And US President Donald Trump says the United States is now sending a larger naval force towards Iran, calling it a powerful armada. At the same time, the US has imposed new sanctions on Iran's Interior Minister, Eksander Momeni, and others, accusing them of overseeing a brutal crackdown on nationwide protests. Treasury officials also targeted a prominent businessman and digital exchanges linked to Iranian financial networks. Meanwhile, Tehran says it is ready to begin negotiations, but only on equal footing. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi says any talks must be based on mutual interests and mutual respect. He was speaking in Istanbul after meeting his Turkish counterpart Hakan Fidan, as Turkey offers to play a facilitating role between the United States and Iran. Dr. Kochar joins us once again to discuss this. Of course, tensions have been building now for weeks, particularly after these protests and the reports that thousands of people in Iran have been killed by the forces there. Now Donald Trump says he is moving what he calls an armada over to the seas near Iran. Do you think the possibility is there for Donald Trump to strike the country, and also when do you think that might occur, and what would be the benefits and of course the cons of doing so?
Thank you, Thomas. A very interesting question because it sums up the entire situation in Iran. So let's discuss this step by step. The first part is that why this action has been taken by America now, and what are the likely implications on Iran and on the course of the talks which are possibly likely to happen. This, I feel, is part of the coercive diplomacy which Trump is resorting to, because he has put sanctions on the Interior Minister. He is raising military pressure of the United States in this region by moving additional warships, as well as the second aircraft carrier also moved in, and sanctions also being imposed now. So he is trying to force Iran into talks from a weakened position. So that has been the basic aim. And also these naval deployments, what are the implications? They signal a readiness for maritime escalation, like in the Gulf of Hormuz or Gulf of Oman. And it also sends a reassurance to the Gulf states as well as to the Israeli allies that the US is ready to take action, as well as deter the proxy actions like the Hezbollah, Houthis, and Hamas. Of course, Hamas now is totally somewhat decimated, but it brings about that part of it. Now, the second part of the question is that will Donald Trump strike, and what will be the implications of that? Okay, now, according to my analysis, there were many who felt that the attack is going to come in 48 hours, 72 hours. I personally feel that Donald Trump will not attack Iran under the present circumstances. And I've got my reasons for saying that. My reasons are that whenever you plan an attack or a war, you are looking at the end state. At what state are you going to leave it, or what are you going to achieve at the end of this entire thing? You see, a regime change in case boots on grounds are not taking place, which has been categorically mentioned by Donald Trump. A regime change becomes a mirage. It becomes a thing which you will not be able to enforce because of the constitutional society of Iran, the way Iran has been structured. a regime change in Iran can only take place in case the people want it to happen. And that has actually not happened because all these strikes, etc., have fizzled out. And the situation has been brought under control by the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. As normally it has been the practice in Iran. So unless there is a dramatic revolution in Iran and this unrest and protest spreads to the entire part of the country, because so far we have seen the protests only limited to certain cities
Yes.
and not the entire region of Iran. So unless it is that kind of a situation, I don't think a regime change may happen. So
Yeah.
that is the reason US is not. And my last point is that Khomeini is also threatened of strikes which may cause a certain amount of damage to the US assets in the Gulf. If you remember, there are almost 9
Yes.
bases which US has, as well as Israel, because they don't have those kind of so many interceptors that they'll be able to tackle all the missiles emanating from Iran. So I think this kind of signaling has worked on Trump's mind that in case he strikes Iran, they are not going to be a great tangible gain. So he is waiting. He's
Okay.
trying to use sanctions and he is looking for talks with Iran.
Dr. Kochhar, thank you very much for taking the time in joining us. Of course, we move on to another US-related development, and the Committee to Protect Journalists has condemned the arrest of former CNN anchor Don Lemon and an independent journalist for their coverage of a protest against immigration raids in Minnesota. CPJ CEO Jody Ginsburg called the arrest an egregious act on the First Amendment and journalists' ability to do their work. Don Lemon faces federal charges of conspiracy to deprive rights and interfering with First Amendment rights. The arrest occurred during his reporting on a protest at a church, part of a larger demonstration against immigration raids. The CPJ warns that these arrests reflect an alarming pattern of escalating threats to press freedom in the US. Let's listen into what Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass had to say on the issue.
We have seen protesters under attack. We have seen people being snatched off our street. And now all of you are at risk. And this is just unacceptable. This assault on our democracy has got to end. And you, all journalists, play such a critical role.
Joining us now to discuss this is Matthew Verdum. He's an American journalist joining us live from Washington. Thank you very much for joining us, Matthew. Of course, a pleasure to talk to you.
Sure.
These federal charges include conspiracy to deprive rights and violating laws usually meant to protect religious worship and not journalists on assignment. Is this really about journalism here, Matthew, or is this the government weaponizing a criminal law to calm reporting?
This is about the FACE Act, which is the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act, which was passed in the era of President Bill Clinton and had to do with protecting reproductive health clinics, like Planned Parenthood clinics, so that women could go in and get abortions without having to confront pro-life protesters. But it also applies to churches, to places of religious worship, so that they can't be invaded by unruly protesters. And so the question here is, was Don Lemon a legitimate journalist just covering a story, or was he an activist who went into the church and disrupted religious worship, which is forbidden under the FACE Act? And it's interesting that leftists like Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, who you showed a clip of a moment ago, are fine when conservative pro-life protesters go to prison for years and years and years for picketing Planned Parenthood, abortion clinics. And yet, when some radical kook leftists break into a church in Minnesota and shut down religious worship, she's fine with it. She and people like her are fine with that. Now, I don't know if Don Lemon was an instigator, a co-conspirator in shutting down the religious service in Minnesota. But if he was, then he should pay the price like anyone else would under the FACE Act. And his defense is going to be that he was a legitimate journalist. But I don't know, if you're a journalist and you wander into an armed robbery and then you help them hold up the tellers, you help them carry out bags of money to their getaway car, are you an innocent bystander who's just, are you just an independent journalist who's covering the events? This is what the court is going to be, a jury is going to be asked to decide.